Chris is awesome. He's as hot as it get, the type to drop you quick with a mafia kick. Got the hunger of a young lion, plus the eye of the tiger. Pummel you like he's a young Tyson. That young knockout kid, split your wig. Rivera Cloverleaf, snap you like a twig. You're more than welcome to step up and get effed up from a hangman's clutch or hero's welcome. You're just a Joe Schmo, he'll bust your chops. It's a KO once he hammer locks the cravat. Tomato cans don't stand a chance, no holds barred. Rolling elbow to a bozo.
Well, as you can see in front of us, we have a distinguished panel for a very unique discussion here on Japanese wrestling and pro wrestling in general. We've got members of various different Japanese organizations. We've got from Big Japan Wrestling, referee Nikkan Lee and Ryuichi Kawakami. And from New Japan Pro Wrestling, we have Kushida, one half of the Time Splitters. And then all the way over on the right there, we have Chris Hero, representing Pro Wrestling Noah and every other goddamn wrestling federation in the world that he's wrestled for. And one face you might not recognize, but is a very special face. It is the face of Yujin Nakazawa, Professor Yujin Nakazawa, who has done such great work translating on these videos you've seen before with myself interviewing Dick Togo and Hayata Junior Fujita, and Yujin is responsible for a lot of the relationships with the Japanese companies for the European wrestling companies over here. So Yujin does a lot of great work behind the scenes, and he is an old school, long-time Japanese wrestling fan, so he has a lot of insight to give. But we're going to just do a real off-the-cuff discussion here, and it's going to flow as it does. And Chris, I think you have some ideas in mind of how to guide things, so I'll let you start steering the ship here.
Sure. I'll start, but basically what I want to start with is everybody's first memories of Japanese wrestling. I remember growing up watching NWA and WWF, and I would see wrestlers like Great Muta, or I would read the Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazines about Jumbo Tsuruta or Tenryu. But it wasn't until probably late 98, early 99, and I started getting some videotapes of like some FMW, some Michinoku Pro, and then when Toryumon started, I watched the first events of Toryumon, and that actually sent me on I started getting all these different tapes of Osaka Pro and Michinoku Pro and whatever, and just try to discover about these guys. And then a couple of years later, I started watching All Japan very heavily. And if you've ever seen my wrestling, you know that I have a very strong Japanese influence with the way that I wrestle. But what I'm curious about is I'd like to ask everybody on this panel your first memories of wrestling, the first time you saw it, and which wrestlers in particular were the ones that you were drawn to initially.
日本プロレスを初めて見た時のことと、あとどんな選手が好きだったかについて話してください。で、僕からいきますか。So, I was born in 1975, and pro wrestling was really huge in Japan then, and Tiger Mask was especially popular. There was an animation Tiger Mask as well. First, before the real wrestler Tiger Mask, animation. I was a big fan of it as well. And then there were two promotions, All Japan and New Japan. And New Japan was somewhat cooler than All Japan. So there's Tiger Mask, Antonio Inoki, Tatsumi Fujinami, and so on. But in All Japan, there were a lot of ex-sumo wrestlers who were very good, but not necessarily cool for young kids. So I was a big fan of Tiger Mask. And Tiger Mask had a lot of good rivals, like Kuniaki Kobayashi, and all sorts of Mexican wrestlers coming, some wrestlers from England as well.
Mark Rocco.
Yeah, Mark Rocco, yeah, Black Tiger.
Cobra.
Yeah. And Steve Wright.
Dynamite Kid.
Yes, he was huge when I was small. Yeah. That's how I started watching wrestling.
Very cool.
川上さんの、プロレス見始めたきっかけとどんな選手が好きでした？
プロレス見始めたきっかけは、バラエティ番組でめっちゃイケってあるんですけど、そこでめっちゃ日本女子プロレスっていうのが企画でありまして、
There was a reality show in Japan and they were showing female wrestling.
それを見て、すごい面白いんだなと。芸人対そのグラビアアイドルとかで、本物の、長代さんだったりライオネスさんだったり、そういうのが出て、その芸人とプロレスの試合をするっていう企画で、すごいそれが楽しくて、そこから見始めましたね。
So this program was about some idols versus real wrestlers. So they used people like Lioness Asuka and Chigusa Nagayo and so on. So lay people versus professional wrestlers. And that was very interesting. That's how I got interested in pro wrestling.
見始めた好きな選手は、テレビでその新日本やってたの、新日本だけだったんで、自分新日本プロレスしか見てなくて、で当時活躍してたのは、今も活躍してますけど、長田さんだったり武藤さんだったり、武藤さん対長田さんのなんか G1 クライマックスの決勝が本当もう偶然夕方テレビでやってて、それでその本物のプロレスの方は生で見てすごい。
When I was small, only I could watch New Japan on TV, and I really liked wrestlers like Nagata and Muta, and actually Muto. So there was a Muto versus Nagata as a final for
G1, yeah.
And that was very interesting.
2000年から2001年
Probably sort of 2000 or 2001.
Yeah, yeah.
串田さん。
はい、僕は1990年の日米レスリングサミットなんですけど、
There was a pro wrestling summit in 1990 in Tokyo Dome.
でその時にハルク・ホーガン対スタン・ハンサー、
How cool.
あとはですね、ジャイアント馬場、アンドル・ザ・ジャイアント、デモリッションズ。
Didn't that have like Sherry interfering on like Tenru and stuff? It was all kinds of crazy
I
stuff.
remember seeing that in Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazines.
Yeah.
Under the Giant and the Giant Baba versus
Demolition. Yeah.
あとアルティメット・ウォリアー対テッド・デビアス。デビアス。
Ted
DiBiase,
DiBiase
yeah.
versus Ultimate Warrior.
一番印象深いのがジャンボ鶴田さんがリック・マーテルにバックドロップしたシーンがあって、それが横からとか真上からとか遠くからとかこう何回も繰り返しそのバックドロップがすごい綺麗なバックドロップで、それは8歳の頃だったんですけど、すごい美しいものが。
Jumbo Tsuruta wrestled Rick Martel.
Rick Martel, yeah.
And he did a German backdrop suplex. And there was a camera filming them from many different angles. And from every angle, they looked very beautiful. Very artistic people.
でその後に武藤さんがアメリカから帰ってきて赤いパンツを履いてブースアウトプレスを見てすごいかっこいいなと思って。
And then after that, Muto was in the States, but he came back to Japan, and then he was wearing a red gear, and he showed this moonsault. That was very cool.
で家で布団を2枚重ねて人形相手に同じことをやってたのがきっかけですね。
And then I put a futon in my room, two layers, and tried to do the same thing with a big doll.
Yeah, awesome. Very cool, very cool.
自分は一番最初に見たのが小学生の時に家の近所に全日本プロレスが来て、その時に見たのが三沢さんのタイガーマスクで、マスクマンの素顔って本当にわからないなと思って、トイレから出てくる時は素顔だろうと思ってトイレの前で待ち伏せして握手してもらったんですけど、その時マスク持ってて、でもやっぱ謎がすごい見たい たいになって、でやっぱ試合もすごいかっこよくて。
前日が地元に来たんです。
はい。
So all Japan came to my hometown, and there was a tiger mask, which was Misawa.
Yeah.
And she was wondering who this man was, so she was waiting for him when he went to the toilet there. But he came back with a mask.
Yeah.
She couldn't figure out who he was.
その後にやっぱマスクマンのプロレスラーばかり気になって、でその時に初めて外国のマスクマンドクトル・ワグナー・ジュニアがすごい気になって、でいろいろ試合とか調べてるうちにやっぱりやっぱ全日本系が好きになって、で三沢さんと川田さんが大阪府立でやったのを初の遠征がそれ一人で車免許取って初めて大阪まで見に行った試合がその試合で、その試合に会場にまだファンである関本さんもいたんですよ。関本さんも同じ会場で見てて、ちょっと川さんが腕を骨折してしまったんですけど、勝って最後腕をロープでついたからみんなの前出てきた時にすごい超人だと思って。
First, so I got interested in wrestlers with masks. So I was a fan of Dr. Wagner.
Yo. Hey guys. Just a little down. Thank you. Don't have to be that quiet. Thank you. Thank you. So anyway, Dr. Wagner.
So Dr. Wagner. So I became fan of masked wrestlers, and my favorite was Dr. Wagner Jr. And after that, I got interested in All Japan. So when I got my first driving license, I drove to Osaka to see Misawa versus Kawada, and that's when Misawa got injured, and he had this
sling.
Yeah, sling around his arm.
Aquatic
still
kicking.
He won.
Yeah.
He defeated Kawada, and that was an amazing
から大日本に行けるまではいろいろ男子のプロレスしか見なかったんで、その時に小橋さんを初めて見た時にこんな腕太い人間の人でいるんだと思って、でその時に小橋さんすごい似た人が関本さんに見たと腕がすごく太くて。
When I saw this Kawada versus Misawa match, actually Sekimoto was there as well as a fan, even though I didn't know him yet. And and then I became a fan of Kobashi. And when I saw him for the first time, I was amazed how anyone could have such a thick arm.
それで大日本入ります。
And then I joined Big Japan.
Very cool, very cool. So I want to follow that up with. So my view of Japanese wrestling was from the opposite spectrum, where it was Japanese wrestlers were visitors. You know, like I said, like the Mutas and Fujinami and whomever. I want to know what were the first gaijin wrestlers. It doesn't have to be American, but what were the first gaijin wrestlers you saw? The ones that you enjoyed, and then how that brought you to knowing more about American wrestling and that style.
クリスとしては、日本の選手がアメリカに行って日本の選手を知るっていう形だったんですけど、日本にいるあなたたちは逆に海外の選手が日本に行って海外の選手を知る、外人の選手を知るっていう形だったんですけど、一番よく覚えてる外人の選手は日韓さんがお願いしてくれ、僕ちょっと考えて。
待ってください、今いっぱいいすぎて。
There are so many that it's difficult.
その時の場面で、でも。
There are so many great moments with gaijin wrestlers.
最初に衝撃を受けたのはやっぱり自分はそんなに背が高くないんで、自分がある人はみんな大きい人ばっかなんですけど、大日本にやっぱ来たクリス・ヒーローがその時にアメリカから5人一気に来たんですね。こんな背の高い人いるんだと思って。
I'm quite short, so I have been watching a lot of small wrestlers mainly. But when I joined the Big Japan, 5 wrestlers came. One of them was you, and I was shocked that there were such a big, tall wrestlers.
190を超えるっていう日本でもやはりもう上の方しか見えないんで。 こんなに腰の位置が高くて、なかなかテレビとか雑誌以外で目の前でこう見たことがなかったんで。
There are very few wrestlers in Japan who is over 190 centimeters, and I had never really seen these wrestlers. So that was a big impact for me.
その後にアメリカのスクールに行きたくて、でそのままアメリカのスクールに行って、その時にスクールにいたのが今の CGW のダニー・ハンボだったり、元 CGW にいたサミ・キャラハンだったり。
Then I went to the States and the dojo there, and there were Danny Hancock and Sammy Callahan.
Well, what about you? Which Gaijin wrestlers made the biggest impression on you when you first started watching?
It's so difficult. Of course, there are so many good Gaijin wrestlers when I was small, so especially in all Japan. There were Stan Hansen, Brody, Terry Gori, Andre's a Giant. I mean, when I was small, mainly Japanese wrestling was basically Japanese wrestling versus Gaijin wrestlers. Yeah, there were just so many. It's hard to name one favorite wrestler. Yeah, the fun one.
衝撃を受けたのはなんかスターハンセン対ビッグバンベイダー。
Hansen versus Vader. That was the biggest impact.
なんか新日本の昔の映像集みたいなので、それがよく出てて。
It has been repeated when they talk about the history of New Japan.
でっかいビッグバンベイダーがもうすごいドロップキックさせて。
Vader is huge, but he could do an amazing drop kick.
俺は衝撃でした。
It's a huge impact.
なんでしょう。
外人のレスラーで一番覚えてる。
覚えてる。僕は新日本とかも好きだったんですけど、並行して FMW が好きで、グラジエーターとかビッグタイトとか。
I liked the New Japan, but also I was watching FMW, so Big Titan and Gladiator.
ウイングとか、アイスマンとか好きで。
So there was an independent promotion called Wing, which is a spin-off of FMW, and there was a guy called Iceman.
Who is Iceman? Who is this?
I don't know. The Iceman,
I don't think it was Parsons.
No. Was he a black guy?
日本人と一番チーアイスマンを知ってます。
Sea Iceman,
名字です。はい。
There's a first one called the Iceman, and that was a Japanese wrestler.
Okay.
And also there were like Jason.
Yeah. Leatherface. Well, this would be for these two gentlemen. I've gone through various phases of the different pro wrestling that I enjoy, but the one guy that I would love to have been able to have wrestled or to be in a match with is Toshiaki Kawakami. Just for some reason, All Japan to me, just the hierarchy of those guys. You had Misawa, who was Baba's protege, right? And then you had Kobashi, who was the embodiment of pretty much fighting spirit. That whole but they were also both very very big and handsome men. And Kawada to me was kind of like the redheaded stepchild. He was like a little, not quite as built. He had like the funky little mullet. He was missing his teeth. He wasn't just the idea of handsome. So I always thought he was the underdog. So I don't know, I loved Kawada so much. So that would be my dream match if I could have one. And I'm curious to see who these guys, if there's one or two or what dream opponents they have? Past or present?
お二人に聞きたいんですけど、クリスは川田俊明さんの大ファンで、藤沢さんは馬場さんの直弟子みたいな感じで、小橋さんはこのファイティングスピリットを体現したりする。川田はちょっとアンダードッグ的な立場にいるんだけど、ものすごいレスラーで彼は惹かれるんですけど、だからもしいつか戦える機会があったら一番戦いたい川田さんなんですけど、そういうふうにこの人とぜひやってみたいというレスラーはお願いします。
僕もその、例えば伊沢さん、小橋さん、四天王がいたわけで、四天王の中でやっぱり川田さんが一番僕は目を引きました。みんなすごいんですけど、川田さんだけなんか違う戦い方だったり、ファイティングスピリット的なものも僕は川田さんの方が感じますし、川田さんとはもちろんできるならやってみたいですし。
So in all Japan there are four main guys: Misawa, Kawada, Taue, and Kobashi. And actually, I really liked Kawada as well among four of them. And actually, I thought that Kawada had the biggest fighting spirit among the four. So if I could wrestle him as well, I'd be so delighted too.
三沢さんはあんまりもなかったんですけど、試合はしてみたかったですね。
Misawa has passed away, but I wanted to wrestle him as well. You have
Yeah, I was in some six-man tags and some tag team matches with Misawa-san, and it's pretty awesome. I feel very fortunate to have been in the ring with him, and also been basically he was my boss. So I feel very, as you can tell if you've watched my matches, with the rolling elbow, there's a very big influence.
And he died in Hiroshima, and on the next day they had a show, and the first match was yours.
Yeah.
Were you scared?
I wasn't scared, but it was very emotional. And every night, because we were on that Hiroshima show was the first of 4 straight days. So what was it, Hakata? I think it was the very next show. We had a show and a show and a show, so we couldn't stop. So before every show, the rest of that tour, there was a ceremony and they would play Misawa-san's theme, and we would all go out to the ringside. But just hearing the crowd cheer for him every night, it brought tears to my eyes. Just to be a part of that.
Because I learned about this accident, I thought that Japanese promotions wouldn't have any shows for a while.
Yeah.
But on the next day.
Yeah, the very next day, and it was. I can understand that theory as well, but with the financial burden of having the shows and stuff, it would have been very detrimental to the company to have canceled all those shows. So it was just kind of like Misawa would have wanted us to continue on and let's have these shows and let's have great shows and great matches in honor of him. And that's what we did for the rest of the tour. And the final day of the tour was at Cork Hall, and it was Kensuke Nakajima and Shiozaki and Kenta. And just the emotion from that match made it the best match I've ever seen live, ever. I was emotionally moved throughout the match. And, they were having the match for Boss.
That was one of the loudest Korakuen crowds of sort of modern wrestling.
Yeah.
Because you see some of the old Korakuen shows from the 80s and early 90s when it's just like this constant wall of noise. And that match in 2009 was of modern sort of Japanese wrestling, one of the loudest I've ever heard Korakuen.
Yeah. I mean, I could put it on tomorrow and watch it and I'd get goosebumps. I'm proud to have been a part of that team and fought through, and wrestled in his honor.
So I think a logical question, sort of moving on from sort of talking about the past of Japanese wrestling, maybe an opinion for all you guys of who you see leading Japanese wrestling into the new generation across the various promotions. So again, we've got a New Japan wrestler, a Big Japan wrestler, and a Noah wrestler. So who are some of the guys you see leading the next way forward?
ベテランとか過去の選手の話したんですけども、日本の今プロレスで若い選手でこれから伸びるぞっていうのはどんな選手がいるでしょうか。
それはもうミスター川上ですね。
No one but Mr. Kawakami. He doesn't look like a rookie. Actually, Kushida is older than him.
Yeah.
He's 30 years old and not 25.
若いね。若いよ。
Very young, young and fresh.
And then Kazuki Hashimoto as well, and Shinya Ishikawa. Big Japan is a good feature.
大日本には石川選手とか橋本選手とか若くて生きのいい選手いて、結構将来は明るいんじゃないでしょうか。
そうですね、比較的若い選手が多いので、まあでも今は怪我人がいっぱい出てしているんで、まあ頑張れる若い人たちの力で盛り上げていかなきゃいけない時期なのかな。
The good thing about BJW is that there are a lot of young wrestlers, and now there have been many injuries, and now it's a good time for younger wrestlers to have opportunities. Yes,
Chris, what about you?
Yeah, I'm a little out of date. I've not been to Japan for 3 years, 3.5 years or something like that. But just two names that pop off. They're not. It's not going to be earth-shattering. These aren't like brand new names, but I think my favorite opponent in Japan has been Go Shiozaki. I've wrestled him in singles. I've wrestled him in tags. I've wrestled him, in different countries. But I think he really has. I haven't seen him wrestle in a while, but I think he has the tools to be a top heavyweight. I'm talking.
I think you'd be impressed with what he's recently did. He had a match with Akebono a couple of weeks ago. Absolutely, so good, so good.
Yeah, it would not surprise me if he was top heavyweight in all of Japanese wrestling in a number of years. Now another guy I've had the pleasure to see live. I've seen him live a couple of times. Once specifically in Cork that stuck out. It's a guy that you're familiar with. Fujita Hayato. Was it Fujita Junior Hayato? Something like that. I just loved his style of wrestling, and he just had this aura about him. Yo! Just a little bit. We're almost done. Just a little. No, it's okay. It's okay. He just had this aura about him, this presence, and it's unlike anything I've really experienced, especially for just a guy very small in stature. He just carries himself a little bit bigger in the ring. And I don't even know what his status is right now. Is he out with an injury for a little while?
I don't think so.
No?
Yujin?
No, Hayato is no, he hasn't got.
He's doing with 0-1 and Michinoku Pro regularly.
I'm really surprised he hasn't broken out more than he has.
I'd love to see him back in Best of Super Juniors and wrestle Kushida. I think would be.
Hayato 選手、藤田Hayato.
I think that'd be a good match. Kushida on the New Japan side, you obviously have Okada as the big guy leading things forward. And what have you thought about Kazuchika Okada since he came back from America and is kind of
選手がアメリ
tough
カか
guy?
ら帰ってきてどういう印象を持ってますか。
僕も最初に会った時は登竜門で
I saw him for the first time at Torino
Yep.
in Mexico.
Yeah.
Very skinny guy.
年はもちろん僕より下で27、26なんですけど
He's younger than me. He's probably 26 or 7.
だけどキャリアはもう10年以上やってるんですよね
He has been in this business longer than me.
で中学卒業してプロレス入ったんで
He entered this business after graduating a junior high school, so he started very young.
そうそれでね 背の高さと運動神経がそのチャンピオンになってしかるべき人だ。
His physique and athletic skills very good, and it's not surprising that he's becoming a huge star there. Yeah, I was talking with the Ultimo Dragon, and he said that he knew that he would become an IWGP champion sooner or later. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And that's interesting coming from Ultimo, and all of his guys were usually juniors.
Yeah, that's right. Unusual.
Yeah. He had he had Owashi and Kondo as students, and I can't really think of any other heavyweights.
I think Taru was kind of
He was before.
He trained before.
Yeah.
So
Taru,
he just kind of was the guy they started using in the initial Toryumon days.
Fuji was kind of a heavyweight.
Yeah, Fuji was war. Fuji was a Tenryu guy, I think.
Yeah.
At first.
Yeah.
Don Fuji.
Yeah.
Chris, anything else you want to?
No. What about you? Any way to wrap this up?
Well, yeah, I suppose we're here in Germany, so let's talk a little about your experience in Germany so far this weekend. You mentioned FMW earlier, Kushida, and the fans around the ring. When Shingo Takagi was over here years ago, he said it's like FMW with the fans so much around the ring, creating so much noise. And what's the atmosphere like for you guys coming in and visiting this promotion and seeing what the crowds are like and what the atmosphere is like?
最後にドイツについて質問なんですけど、ドイツのこのファンっていうのはリングの周り囲んで、高木慎吾さんがここに来た時はなんかまるで昔の FMW の試合後みたいな雰囲気だって言ってたんですけども、このドイツで試合することについてどう思いますか？期待した印象ですか？瀬田さんって言われたかな。
新日本プロレスだと現実的にフェンスがあるので、距離がめちゃくちゃ近いので、なんか選手がね 100% だと思うところがそれ以上のものが出る可能性のあるリングなんだ。
New Japan show, there's always a fence around the ring, so there's big distance from the ring and the fans. But here it's really a direct connection between fans and wrestlers. So that might be a good thing. やりづらいってことはないですね。It wasn't difficult to wrestle in this different environment. Good. Kawakami選手はthe second time that he wrestled in Germany.
そうですね、今、串田さんが言ったように、そのお客さんの声というものが直にこう伝わってきたり、お客さんが思ってることだったり、感情だったり、そういうのもすごい伝わってくる、それはやっぱり距離が近いので。
Because of the short distance, I can hear the fans and I can feel how they're feeling. So that's a direct impression that you get.
だからでもやりやすいんですよね、日本より。
So actually it's easier to wrestle here than in Japan.
And Yuki, your thoughts on the crowd in WXW and what it's like for you as a referee in the matches? You have a unique perspective.
レフェリーとして環境はどう思いますか？
あと同じようにリングサイドに、もう2人が言ったみたいな感じなんですけども、良くも悪くも自分に対して一番近くで見て声をかけてくれる人がすぐ近くにいるっていうのは日本ではないすごい緊張感だし、あと盛り上げてくれるのも君は面白くないよダメだよって言ってくれるのもすぐ近くにいるファンの人なんで。やってて楽しいですね。日本で味わえない感覚です。
All the real hardcore fans, they always surround the ring, and they can tell me if she's doing okay or not doing okay. So that's actually quite.
Has anyone ever told her that she's not doing an okay job?
なんかお前ダメだよって言われたことありますか？
ありますね。あります。
どんな時？There have been some occasions when fans complain to me.
There was 3, Yuki!
ドイツのすごくあるレスラーの熱狂的なファンの方が見えて、でシングルマッチをやってたんですけど、ワンツーでキックアウトしました。その時に彼のファンの女の子が今の3でしょって言って物投げられて唾かけられました。
There was a huge fan of a certain German wrestler by the ring. And when
ペットボトル
I
と
count 1, 2, and the wrestler kicked out, and the fan complained that she was too slow to count, and she spit on her.
Can't do that.
Awesome.
Well, guys, this has been awesome. I want to thank you all for doing this, and everyone have a great day at the show this evening and tomorrow as well. And yeah, best of luck to everyone. Thank you again.
お疲れ様でした。
I don't know how to hit stop.